everybody, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be doing my January wrap-up. So yeah, let's get to the video. In the month of January, I read 8 books and 2,823 pages, so that's a pretty good reading month for me. I'm going to be listing the books in no particular order, just whatever order they're on my story graph, to be honest. So yeah, let's get to the reviews. So the first book that I'm going to be talking about from January will be An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. I gave this book 3.25 stars, so I am going to be selling it. I've already listed it on my Pango shop. It was alright. So the concept of the story is that there's this town that's sort of inside of the realm of fairy, sort of, and the fae can't actually create anything for themselves, so they crave art and really any form of art from humans. And the main character is a portrait artist who is like the most famous of her time, and so a lot of the fae, including very important fae, come to her to get portraits, and she ends up, of course, involved in fairy politics and stuff. So it is better than A Court of Thorns and Roses, and it's definitely a very similar concept. So like if you didn't like A Court of Thorns and Roses, this would definitely be a good alternative because it is similar but definitely better. Now, the reason that I didn't personally love it a ton would be that nothing happens. Not a thing. That's not entirely true. Some things happen, but like it felt like there were really 5 scenes in the book and that very little happened between them. Now, it was beautifully written and each of the scenes was described very thoroughly, but I just wanted more out of it, I guess. And I wanted a little bit more depth out of the relationships between the characters, but I liked the writing style and I liked the concept and I really liked where it was going. It just didn't feel complete to me, I guess. So, yeah. The next book that I'm going to be talking about for January would be A Magic Steeped in Poison by Judy I. Lin. This book I gave 2 stars, so I also have listed this on my Pango shop and I'm not planning to keep it. It just wasn't really a book for me, I guess, and I probably should have done more research before I read it. So, as you know, young adult can be really hit or miss for me, and this was definitely a miss for me personally. I did not love the present tense first person narrator. I really liked that in the Hunger Games because the story felt urgent, you know? Every time, at least I think that's how the Hunger Games were. I'll have to check, but a story needs to feel urgent for it to be in first person present tense. There needs to feel like there's action happening and that you're right alongside the character for that to really work. But this story almost wanted to be like contemplative, but first person present tense. And so there would be all of these long descriptions and internal thinking, and it would be in first person present tense, and I just did not vibe with that. And then the main character sort of felt blank to me, sort of like a blank main character to experience the world, which was very rich, and you know, all the descriptions of food and tea and the city and everything it was very atmospheric. So if you're looking for an atmospheric read about a tea magic system, this is definitely the book for you. But if you're looking for like deep characters and relationships, which is generally what I'm kind of looking for, you might want to pass on this one for that. But it does have a beautiful cover. So I forgot for this book to do a summary, but this is basically about a girl who, I guess this is going to be spoilers if you didn't want to read even the description of the book, but this is about a girl whose mother has died from her brewing some poisoned tea, and she decides in order to save her sister, she's going to enter this competition of like the greatest magic tea people and try to become like the court tea person. And it's supposed to be about the competition and her kind of learning magic and brewing a lot of tea. So the next book that I'm going to be talking about is going to be Mistborn Secret History. So this book I gave 4.25 stars. I really liked it. I know that a lot of people don't. They wish that like they hadn't had this information because it's sort of the behind the scenes, but I actually really liked it. I liked seeing more of the character that this is about, and I liked getting a better idea of what is kind of going on behind the scenes. And I think that part of that is because of where I am in the Stormlight Archive, and this just made a lot of that make a lot more sense to me and sort of fleshed out some things that happened in book 3 of the Stormlight Archive. And so I felt like this gave me a much better understanding of the overall Cosmere, which is something that I haven't really gotten a lot of in the books that I've read, because of course I've read Warbreaker and I've read up to Oathbringer, but I have not read Rhythm of War yet. So, oh, and I also haven't read Mistborn Era 2 yet. This is why I read this, because I wanted to get into Mistborn Era 2 soon. So yeah, I'm not going to tell you what this book is about, because probably you already know, and if you don't, you probably don't want to know, because it's kind of a spoiler for a lot of things. So, Mistborn Secret History, pretty good. You should check it out. So the next book that I'm going to talk about for January is White Knight in the Dresden Files. I gave this book 5 stars. It was amazing. This was really my favorite at the time for the series. I thought the previous book was a great setup, Proven Guilty, I believe. I loved a lot of the things that came into the story, all of the setup that happened, and this I felt really delivered on all of that. And it was also sort of more of a classic murder mystery almost at the beginning, and that was really fun. And so, yeah, I don't want to say too much more because, the series. But I am planning to do a spoiler review for Changes later this week. So I'll be able to talk about more of my spoiler thoughts on the Dresden Files. The next book that I'm going to talk about that I read in January is Small Favor, also in the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. This is the 10th book in the series. I gave this book 4.75 stars, so I really, really enjoyed it. I didn't love it quite as much as White Knight, though. Again, I shouldn't say too much more, but just another great entry in the Dresden Files with some really interesting combinations of characters and all the side characters. I just love how all of the setup throughout the series always kind of comes back into play later, how there'll be a small mention in a previous book and then a few books later it'll be super relevant and you're like, oh my goodness, that thing, it was important. I'm glad I noticed. And so just another great entry. Excuse my phone dinging. The next book that I'm going to be talking about is Turncoat, also in the Dresden Files, book 11. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4.75 stars again, so I thought it was really great. I thought that, given what we know about Harry and his relationship with one of the characters that comes back, this book was it was really fun. It was a fun ride. I thought it was really excellent. I did take off a little bit just because I did guess who the culprit, I suppose I'll say, to stay spoiler free, the culprit was. Basically, as soon as that character was introduced, I was like, oh, I bet it's him, and then it was. So I didn't love that. I thought maybe it should have been a little bit more obscure, but I didn't catch everything about it, and I did still like how it went down. So really good entry. It was a blast to read. Next book that I read in January was Dawn Shard by Brandon Sanderson, the book 3.5. Yes, in the Stormlight Archive. I thought this book was really fun. I really like the main character, whose name I am not going to try to say. I'm just not. It's not worth it. I really liked this book. It was on a ship. It involved a bunch of side characters that don't usually get a ton of page time, so that was really fun. Obviously, I didn't love it as much as one of the bigger stories. I also didn't like it quite as much as Edge Dancer, just because I really like Lift. I like Lift a lot more. She's just so funny with all of the focus on kind of food heists, and it was fun. This book was still fun, but it was a little bit more serious, and so, it wasn't as much of a blast to read through for me, and I did miss, the main characters of the Stormlight Archive a little bit. So, still really great, really glad I read it, really excited to pick up Rhythm of War. Final book that I read in January was The Dragon's Promise by Elizabeth Lim. This is the second book in the Six Crimson Cranes series. I gave this book 4 stars. Honestly, in retrospect, I would maybe lower that a little bit, but I really liked the ending, so I was a little bit happier when I finished than I think I am now, viewing it as more of a whole. I thought that the beginning third was completely unnecessary to the story. Really, it added nothing for me. And then I liked the book after that. I just didn't like it as much as the first one, because the first one felt like a fairy tale, and that's why I loved the ending, because it felt like a fairy tale again. But it felt like it had kind of lost some of that fairy tale vibe and kind of meandered for a while, and so it just wasn't as tight of a plot for me. I still enjoyed it, and I like all of the characters and the writing style and all of that. I just wish it hadn't kind of dragged so much at the beginning and then kind of meandered in the middle. But it's still a series that I definitely would recommend Really good and beautiful artwork on the covers. For those of you who don't know, the first book, Six Crimson Cranes, is about it's a retelling of the like Seven Swans fairy tale. I'm not sure what that fairy tale is actually called, but it's the one where the girl, her brothers get turned into swans, seven swans, or six swans because she's the seventh child. And she has to sew them some sweaters out of nettles, and that'll restore them to humanity or whatever. In this, of course, they get turned into cranes, and there's actually a bit more of a plot than just the original fairy tale. But yeah, it's really cute, sort of Asian setting, hence the cranes. And the main character is just really relatable, realistic. You know, at first she's pretty naive and everything, but you see her grow throughout the series, and that's really good. So yeah, I can't tell you too much about what this book is about just because it would kind of be a spoiler for the first book, but yeah, you should definitely check this series out. All right, thank you so much for watching this video, everybody. Bye!